Just one night to manifest success and motivation. Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every human life when time seems to pause, not because the world stops moving, but because something within you awakens. It is the moment when you realize that everything you have been searching for outside of yourself has always been waiting inside. Tonight is not just another night. It is not ordinary. It is not accidental. You did not arrive here by chance. You are here because a deeper part of you knows that change does not require permission from circumstances, it requires a decision of consciousness. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been taught to believe that success is distant, that motivation must be chased, and that transformation is a slow and painful process. We were told to wait our turn, to struggle longer, to suffer more, and then maybe life would reward us. But what if that belief itself is the very thing delaying your breakthrough? What if the door you've been knocking on has already been open, waiting for you to step through? Tonight, we are here to challenge everything you think you know about success, motivation, and personal power. This is not a message about hustle until exhaustion or forcing outcomes through pressure and fear. This is a message about alignment. Because when alignment replaces effort, life begins to move with you instead of against you. When the inner world shifts, the outer world has no choice but to follow. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a hidden truth few people are ever taught. Your life is not controlled by what happens to you, but by what you assume to be true about yourself. Long before results appear, long before recognition arrives, long before doors open, a silent decision is made within. And it is that decision, not luck, not background, not timing, that shapes destiny. This gathering is about understanding that one night just one can become the turning point of your entire story. Not because the night itself holds magic, but because you do. One clear moment of inner conviction can do more than years of struggle lived in doubt. One shift in self-concept can collapse old limitations that have followed you for a lifetime. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is an invitation. An invitation to stop waiting for evidence before you believe. An invitation to stop identifying with past failures, delays, and disappointments. An invitation to assume a new role, to step into the version of yourself that already knows how. This story ends. As we move forward, I ask you for only one thing: suspend disbelief. Let go of the past, even if just for this moment. Because if you can allow yourself to see differently tonight, to feel differently tonight, and to assume differently tonight, then this will not just be a speech you heard. It will be the night your life began to change. The moment everything changes is rarely loud. It does not arrive with applause, announcements, or permission from the world. It happens quietly, internally, when a person decides, without needing proof, that the old version of themselves is no longer valid. This is the night that separates who you were from who you are becoming. Not because the calendar says so, but because your consciousness does. Most people think change begins when circumstances improve. They wait for a sign, a breakthrough, a phone call, or an opportunity. But waiting keeps them trapped in the same loop, because the external world only reflects inner assumptions. When you wait for life to change first, you are unknowingly affirming that you are powerless. And power never responds to waiting, it responds to decision. This keynote is about that decision. The night you decide is the night everything changes. A decision is not a wish. It is not hope. It is not emotional excitement that fades by morning. A true decision is calm, settled, and final. It carries no desperation. When you decide, you are no longer asking, will this work? You are declaring, this is who I am now. Identity, once assumed, begins to express itself through action, opportunity, and outcome. Understand this: life does not reward effort alone, it rewards alignment. Two people can work equally hard, yet one advances effortlessly while the other remains stuck. The difference is not intelligence, talent, or luck. The difference is what they have decided to be true about themselves. The moment you decide that success is inevitable for you, the struggle to prove yourself dissolves. You stop chasing. You start allowing. This night matters because it is the night you withdraw energy from the old story. The story that says you are behind. The story that says you missed your chance. The story that says others are more deserving, more gifted, more chosen. That story only survives because you keep revisiting it mentally. Once you decide it no longer represents you, it loses authority. And what loses authority loses power. Many people confuse decision with effort. They think deciding means forcing change through willpower. But true decision does the opposite. It removes resistance. When you decide, you stop arguing with reality. You stop rehearsing failure. You stop explaining why things are hard. You simply accept a new inner position and allow life to reorganize around it. That is why one night can undo years of limitation. Years of struggle were not caused by lack of effort, they were caused by an unconscious agreement with an identity that no longer fits. When that agreement is broken, the past releases its grip. The night you decide, your inner dialogue changes. You no longer speak to yourself as someone trying to become successful, motivated, or disciplined. You speak as someone who already is. And that shift in self-talk may seem subtle, but it is the root of every visible transformation. Think about it carefully. Every action you take comes from an assumption about who you are. If you assume you are inconsistent, you act inconsistently. If you assume you are powerful, you act decisively. Behavior is not the cause, it is the echo. When you decide tonight, you are not deciding what you will do, you are deciding who you are being. And once being changes, doing follows naturally. This decision also changes how time behaves in your life. When you are undecided, everything feels slow. Progress drags. Motivation fluctuates. But when you decide, time compresses. Opportunities appear closer. People show up unexpectedly. Ideas arrive without effort. Not because the world changed, but because your perception did. A decided mind moves differently. It does not beg for results. It expects them. An expectation is a command to reality. You must understand that your mind has been listening to you all along. Every time you said, it's hard, it takes long. Maybe one day, your mind accepted that as instruction. Tonight, when you decide differently, you give your mind a new set of orders. And the mind, once given clarity, executes without hesitation. Is why hesitation is so costly. Hesitation keeps you straddling two identities, the one you are leaving and the one you are afraid to fully become. And in that space, nothing moves. Decision collapses hesitation. It closes the door behind you so you cannot keep looking back. The night you decide, excuses lose their voice. Not because problems disappear, but because problems no longer define you. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop seeking permission from people who have never lived your destiny. You understand that confirmation is unnecessary when conviction is present. There is a deep peace that comes with decision, not excitement, not adrenaline, peace. Because once you decide, you are no longer fighting yourself. And most exhaustion in life comes not from work, but from inner conflict. This night also rewires motivation. Motivation stops being something you chase in the morning and lose by evening. It becomes steady because it is rooted in identity. You wake up aligned with who you have decided to be. And alignment produces movement. You act not because you are forcing yourself, but because it feels unnatural not to. Many people fear decision because they think it locks them into pressure. In truth, indecision is what creates pressure. Decision creates flow. It simplifies life. It narrows focus. It eliminates mental noise. When you decide, you conserve energy, and conserved energy accelerates results. Remember this, the world is not waiting for you to be ready. T is waiting for you to be clear. Clarity is more powerful than readiness. Readiness hesitates. Clarity moves. Tonight, the night you decide, you are not trying to control outcomes. You are choosing alignment. You are saying, this is the direction. This is the identity. This is the assumption. And once assumed, life must comply. Because reality has no choice but to mirror a decided consciousness. And from that moment forward, everything, your thoughts, your actions, your encounters, your timing begins to cooperate with the decision you made in silence. Mode. People believe that success is earned through time, repetition, and relentless effort. They are taught that progress must be slow, that struggle is proof of seriousness, and that nothing meaningful can happen quickly. Yet this belief quietly keeps them trapped. Because effort without the right inner assumption does not create freedom, it creates fatigue. The truth few are willing to face is this: one night of right assumption can outweigh years of effort built on doubt. Effort alone has never been the true currency of success. Alignment is. Two individuals can apply the same effort, follow the same steps, and pursue the same goal, yet arrive at completely different outcomes. One moves forward with ease, while the other remains locked in resistance. The difference lies not in action, but in what each person assumes to be true about themselves and their future. Assumption is not pretending. It is not blind optimism. It's the quiet inner conviction that something is already settled. When you assume correctly, action becomes inspired rather than forced. You are no longer pushing life uphill, you are walking with it downhill. Years of effort often fail because they are powered by the wrong identity. A person who sees themselves as struggling will work from struggle. A person who sees themselves as lacking will act from lack. Even when they work hard, their inner state contradicts their outer actions. This contradiction creates friction, delays, and repeated setbacks. One night of right assumption removes that contradiction. In a single night, you can stop identifying as someone trying and begin identifying as someone who already is. And the moment identity changes, effort transforms. It becomes lighter, more effective, and more consistent. You do not have to motivate yourself to act when action aligns with who you believe you are. Most people underestimate how powerful assumption truly is. They think the mind is passive, when in fact it is creative. Whatever you accept as true about yourself becomes the lens through which you interpret events, filter through which you see opportunities, and the standard by which you judge what is possible. When that lens changes, your entire experience of life changes with it. Consider this. If you assume that success takes a long time, every delay feels normal. If you assume that progress is difficult, obstacles feel expected. But if you assume that things move quickly for you, delays feel temporary and obstacles become irrelevant. The assumption determines not only what happens, but how you respond to what happens. Years of effort without the right assumption train the mind to expect resistance. Over time, struggle becomes familiar, even comfortable. People begin to associate progress with pain and exhaustion. They wear effort like a badge of honor, unaware that they are reinforcing the very identity that keeps them stuck. Right. Assumption breaks this pattern instantly. When you assume that success is natural for you, you stop overcompensating. You stop proving. You stop forcing. You act with quiet confidence. And confidence, unlike effort, attracts cooperation from people, from circumstances, from life itself. One night of right assumption works because the subconscious mind does not measure time, it measures acceptance. It does not ask how long you have believed something. It only asks whether you believe it now. The moment a new assumption is accepted as true, the mind begins to organize behavior, perception, and opportunity around it. This is why long years of effort can be undone in a single night. Not because time is erased, but because the cause has been replaced. Effort is external. Assumption is internal. And the internal always governs the external. People often resist assumption because it feels irresponsible to them. They fear disappointment. They believe that assuming success without evidence will make them delusional. But the opposite is true. Right assumption does not deny reality, it reorders it. It shifts your position from reacting to circumstances to influencing them. When you assume correctly, you are not ignoring the present, you are redefining it. You are declaring that the present is transitional, not final. That declaration changes how you move, speak, decide, and persist. Years of effort often come from the fear of not doing enough, not being enough, not becoming enough. One night of right assumption dissolves that fear by answering it. When you assume fulfillment, the question disappears. Notice how motivation behaves when assumption is right. You do not need hype. You do not need pressure. You feel a steady pull toward action, not a push. You wake up clearer. You make decisions faster. You stop overthinking because you trust the direction you are moving in. This is not magic. This is alignment. Right assumption also changes your tolerance for what no longer fits. When you assume success, you naturally release habits, environments, and conversations that contradict it. Not through discipline, but through disinterest. The old ways feel foreign. The new ways feel obvious. Years of effort try to build discipline on top of misalignment. One night of assumption makes discipline unnecessary. Understand this clearly. Effort amplifies assumption. If the assumption is wrong, effort magnifies struggle. If the assumption is right, effort magnifies results. That is why effort alone is unreliable, but assumption is transformative. When people say, I've been working so hard for so long, what they often mean is, I have been assuming the wrong identity while taking the right actions. And no amount of action can override a deeply held self concept. One night of right assumption rewrites that self concept. It says, I am no longer the one chasing, I am the one allowing. And allowance is powerful because it removes resistance. This is why change can feel sudden after a long period of stagnation. It was never about time. It was about assumption reaching a tipping point. Once assumption changes, life responds quickly. Conversations shift, doors open, ideas surface. Not because the world suddenly noticed you, but because you noticed yourself differently. Years of effort teach endurance. One night of right assumption teaches authority. And authority over your inner world is the only authority that truly matters. Success is not something you move toward in the future. It is a state you step into in the present. Most people live their entire lives chasing outcomes, believing that fulfillment sits somewhere ahead of them, waiting to be reached. But the truth is far more precise and far more liberating. You do not create success by reaching it. You create it by entering the state where it is already done. A state is an inner position of being. It is the atmosphere of your thoughts, the emotional tone you live in, and the identity you silently occupy throughout the day, long before success shows up as money, recognition, confidence, or freedom. It must first exist as a settled fact within you. When it does, the outer world rearranges itself to match that inner reality. Most people misunderstand this and try to force the state through action. They tell themselves, once I achieve more, then I'll feel confident. Once I succeed, then I'll relax. But this keeps them trapped, because the state they are waiting for is the very cause of the achievement they desire. You cannot receive what you refuse to embody. Entering the state where success is already done does not mean pretending or denying reality. It means withdrawing your attention from lack and placing it on fulfillment. It means deciding internally that the outcome is settled, even if the path is still unfolding. When you make that decision, you shift from effort to allowance. Allowance is powerful because it removes urgency. Urgency signals to the subconscious that something is missing. Fulfillment signals that nothing is missing. And the subconscious always moves you toward consistency with what it accepts as true. The moment you enter the fulfilled state, your inner dialogue changes. You stop asking, what if it doesn't work? And start assuming, of course it works. The questions you ask yourself shape the answers life gives you. A mind anchored in fulfillment does not look for proof, it expects confirmation. This is why two people in identical circumstances can experience completely different outcomes. One is living in the state of struggle, the other in the state of completion. One reacts to life, the other influences it. The difference is not visible at first, but it becomes undeniable over time. To enter the state where success is already done, you must first release the idea that the present moment defines you. The present moment is not a verdict. It is a reflection of previous assumptions. Once you understand this, you stop judging your current reality as final. You see it as temporary, malleable, and responsive. This perspective is freeing. It removes emotional attachment to setbacks. You no longer panic when things seem slow, because you know speed is not the cause, state is. You remain calm, grounded, and internally satisfied, even while external details are still aligning. Calm is one of the clearest signs that you have entered the fulfilled state. Not excitement, not adrenaline, calm certainty, the kind of peace that comes from knowing the end is secure. When you feel this calm, your nervous system relaxes, your decisions sharpen, and your actions become precise rather than reactive. In this state, effort transforms. You still act, but you act without force. You take steps, not to make it happen, but because movement feels natural. Action flows from identity, not fear. And action rooted in identity carries power. When success is assumed as done, motivation becomes consistent. You do not need to convince yourself to show up, because showing up aligns with who you believe yourself to be. Resistance fades, procrastination loses its grip, and discipline becomes a byproduct of clarity. Entering the fulfilled state also changes how you interpret feedback. You stop taking temporary setbacks personally. You no longer see obstacles as signs to stop, but as neutral events on a path that is already decided. This keeps your energy clean and your focus steady. One of the most important aspects of this state is emotional neutrality toward outcome. Paradoxically, when you stop emotionally clinging to results, they arrive faster. Detachment is not indifference, it is confidence. It is the knowing that what is yours cannot miss you. In the fulfilled state, you stop scanning the world for validation. You stop checking, measuring, and comparing. Comparison phase, because competition only exists when identity is uncertain. When identity is stable, comparison becomes irrelevant. Your relationships also begin to shift. People respond differently to you because you are no longer seeking approval or reassurance. You communicate with ease. You set boundaries without guilt. You attract respect without demanding it. This is not something you try to do. It is something that happens naturally. When you live from completion, the state of success also refines your intuition. Decisions become simpler. You sense what aligns and what doesn't. You stop forcing connections, opportunities, or timelines that no longer resonate. You trust your inner guidance because it is no longer clouded by desperation. This is why entering the state is the true work. Techniques, strategies, and plans only work when the state supports them. Without the right state, even the best methods fail. With the right state, even simple actions yield extraordinary results. Many people ask, how long do I have to stay in this state? The answer is simple. Until it feels natural. At first, you may return to old thinking patterns. That is not failure, it is habit dissolving. Each time you choose fulfillment over doubt, the state strengthens. Over time, it becomes your default. And once the fulfilled state becomes your default, success no longer feels special, it feels expected. That expectation is not arrogance, it is alignment. The world always reflects the state you live in, not the goals you talk about. When you consistently live as though success is already done, life must echo that assumption. Not because you demand it, but because reality mirrors consciousness, the moment. You stop waiting for success and start being successful internally. The future begins to rearrange itself around your present identity. And that is the power of entering the state where success is already done. Motivation is in. Or something you summon, it is something you express. Most people misunderstand motivation because they treat it like fuel that must be constantly refilled. They wake up hoping to feel inspired, pushing themselves when they don't, and blaming themselves when the energy fades. But the truth is simpler and far more freeing. Motivation is the natural outcome of identity. You do not act because you are motivated. You are motivated because you are acting in alignment with who you believe you are. Willpower is temporary. Identity is permanent. When a person relies on willpower, they are fighting themselves. They are trying to force behavior that does not match their self-concept. This is why motivation rises and falls. The mind resists anything that feels inconsistent with identity. But when behavior aligns with identity, resistance disappears. Think about it carefully. A person who sees themselves as disciplined does not need to force discipline. A person who sees themselves as successful does not need to hype themselves into action. They move naturally because their actions confirm who they already believe themselves to be. Most people attempt to change their lives by changing their habits first. They say, if I wake up earlier, work harder, and stay consistent, I will become successful. But this reverses the true order of creation. Being precedes doing. You must become the person who naturally lives those habits. Identity is the lens through which you interpret effort. If your identity is rooted in struggle, effort feels heavy. If your identity is rooted in capability, effort feels purposeful. The same action feels completely different depending on who you believe you are while performing it. This is why motivation cannot be sustained through pressure. Pressure implies force. Force implies resistance, and resistance drains energy. Identity, on the other hand, produces effortless momentum. It pulls you forward rather than pushing you from behind. When you change identity, motivation stabilizes. You no longer depend on mood. You no longer negotiate with excuses. You act because it feels aligned, not because you are trying to escape guilt or fear. The mistake most people make is waiting to feel motivated before they act. They tell themselves, once I feel inspired, I'll start. But inspiration follows action when action aligns with identity. If you wait for motivation without addressing identity, you wait indefinitely. Identity answers the question, who am I when no one is watching? The answer determines your consistency more than any external reward ever could. If you see yourself as someone who starts strong but fades, your behavior will reflect that. If you see yourself as someone who finishes what they begin, persistence becomes natural. You are not forcing yourself to persist, you are simply being congruent. This is why changing identity feels uncomfortable at first. The mind resists unfamiliar self-concepts. When you begin to assume a higher identity, old habits protest, doubt surfaces, fear whispers. But this is not a sign to stop, it is a sign that transformation is underway. The moment you assume a new identity, motivation begins to reorganize itself around it. You become selective with your time. You feel less tolerance for distractions. You begin to value your energy differently, not because you are trying harder, but because your self-image demands it. Motivation born from identity is quiet. It does not need external validation. It does not announce itself. It simply moves. This is why truly successful people appear calm. They are not driven by anxiety, they are guided by alignment. Identity also determines how you respond to setbacks. A person who identifies as a learner sees failure as feedback. A person who identifies as a victim sees failure as proof to quit. Motivation collapses not because failure happens, but because identity interprets failure in a discouraging way. When identity is rooted in growth, setbacks do not drain motivation. They refine it. You adjust, not retreat. You observe, not panic. And because your sense of self remains intact, momentum continues. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is moving from outcome-based identity to value-based identity. Instead of saying, I am motivated when I succeed, you say, I am someone who shows up, regardless of outcome. This stabilizes motivation because it is no longer dependent on external results. External results fluctuate. Identity does not. When motivation is identity-driven, discipline feels dignified rather than punishing. You respect your commitments because they reflect who you are. You keep promises to yourself because breaking them would feel inconsistent, not because you fear consequences. This is why affirmations alone often fail. If affirmations do not align with identity, the mind rejects them. But when you gradually embody a new identity through assumption and action, motivation locks in naturally. Identity also governs focus. When you know who you are, you stop entertaining distractions that do not match that identity. You do not need to eliminate distractions. Through force, they fall away through irrelevance. A person who identifies as an athlete does not debate whether to train. A person who identifies as a leader does not question whether to prepare. A person who identifies as successful does not wonder whether to act, they act. This is the difference between forcing a routine and becoming the type of person who lives that routine. One drains you, the other sustains you. Motivation rooted in identity also brings patience. You are no longer in a rush to prove yourself. You trust the process because you trust who you are becoming. This patience keeps your nervous system calm and your mind clear, which further amplifies effectiveness. The final and most important and truth is this: you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your identity. Goals inspire temporarily, identity sustains permanently. Once you decide who you are being, motivation becomes a consequence, not a requirement. You stop chasing energy and start embodying direction. And when identity leads, motivation follows quietly, steadily, and without force. The final act of creation does not happen through effort, repetition, or force. It happens in surrender. It happens when the mind grows quiet and the body relaxes, when resistance loosens. Its grip and imagination is free to impress itself upon the deeper self. This is why falling asleep in the feeling of victory is not symbolic, it is decisive. Sleep is not rest alone. Sleep is transition. It is the doorway between the conscious and the subconscious, between intention and embodiment. What you feel as you cross that threshold is not fleeting emotion, it is instruction. The subconscious accepts it without argument, without logic, without delay. Most people unknowingly use this moment against themselves. They fall asleep rehearsing worries, replaying failures, anticipating struggle. Night after night, they impress the same story into the deeper mind and then wonder why the same patterns repeat. The subconscious is not punishing them, it is obeying them to fall asleep in the field of victory is to reverse this pattern at the root. Victory is not excitement, it is not anticipation, it is fulfillment. NT. It is the calm satisfaction that comes after something is complete. When you feel victory, you are no longer reaching, you are resting. And rest is the signal of completion. The subconscious mind responds to completion. This is why visualization that feels strained produces little change, while a simple feeling held gently produces powerful results. The subconscious does not respond to effort. It responds to acceptance. When you fall asleep, accepting that your desire is fulfilled, the mind records it as fact. Feeling is the language of the subconscious. Words are secondary. Logic is irrelevant. Emotion quiet. Settled emotion is what imprints reality. To fall asleep in victory means you are no longer asking life to prove anything. You are no longer negotiating with doubt. You are no longer checking for signs. You are resting in the knowing that the matter is settled. That knowing is not loud. It is peaceful. Peace is one of the clearest indicators that the inner work is complete. When you sleep in that peace, you are not escaping reality, you are reprogramming it. You are instructing the subconscious to reorganize perception, behavior, timing, and opportunity around a fulfilled assumption. The next day, you may not see immediate evidence, but something subtle will have shifted. Your reactions soften. Your thoughts slow. Your decisions become clearer. This is not coincidence. It is alignment beginning to express itself. Victory felt before sleep changes the nervous size. TEM. The body releases tension. The mind stops scanning for danger. In that relaxed state, creativity and intuition awaken. Solutions surface effortlessly. You begin to move through the day with quiet confidence, not because you are forcing belief, but because belief has already been accepted. Beneath the surface, this practice works because it bypasses the conscious mind, the part that doubts, analyzes, and resists. In the threshold of sleep, the conscious mind loosens control. The subconscious takes the suggestion directly. You do not need to visualize every detail. You do not need to repeat affirmations endlessly. All that is required is the feeling of completion. A single scene that implies success held gently. A simple sense of relief. A quiet gratitude. Then release. Release is essential. The moment you cling, you imply lack. The moment you relax, you imply fulfillment. Falling asleep in victory also dissolves impatience. Impatience comes from believing the outcome is distant. When you sleep feeling fulfilled, distance collapses. Time loses urgency. You are no longer waiting, you are allowing. Allowance accelerates manifestation because it removes resistance. Resistance is not opposition, it is tension. Victory relaxes tension. This is why people often experience breakthroughs after they stop trying so hard. They did not give up. They let go. Letting go is not quitting desire. It is quitting struggle. Night after night, this practice reshapes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone for whom things work out. You wake with expectation, not hope. Expectation is powerful because it is calm. It assumes continuity. Your subconscious begins to search for confirmation of what it has accepted. It filters perception. It highlights opportunities. It nudges behavior, not through force, but through inclination. You may suddenly feel drawn to take certain action. You may encounter people unexpectedly. You may receive ideas that feel obvious in hindsight. These are not random, they are responses. Victory impressed at night expresses as coherence. During the day, it is important to understand that this is not a one-time ritual. It is a state you return to. Some nights will feel natural. Other nights the mind will resist. That resistance is old conditioning dissolving. Each time you return to fulfillment, the pathway strengthens. Do not fight the mind when doubt appears. Fighting implies effort. Simply redirect attention to the feeling of completion, not vividly, gently. The subconscious does not need intensity. It needs consistency. As this practice deepens, you will notice that problems lose emotional weight. You still address them, but without urgency. You respond instead of react. This emotional neutrality is not apathy, it is confidence. Confidence grows when the subconscious knows the end. One of the most powerful shifts that occurs is trust in timing. You stop demanding immediacy. You stop measuring progress obsessively. You trust movement even when you cannot see it. That trust removes interference. Interference delays manifestation more than doubt ever could. When you fall asleep in victory, you stop interfering. You hand the details over to the deeper intelligence that governs coordination, timing, and sequence. That intelligence operates far more efficiently than conscious effort ever could. This is why struggle feels exhausting. It is the conscious mind trying to do a job it was never designed to do. The subconscious orchestrates outcome. The conscious mind chooses states. Each night, you choose the state. Victory chosen consistently becomes identity. Identity becomes behavior. Behavior becomes circumstance. Circumstance always follows state. Eventually, the feeling of victory no longer feels like imagination. It feels like memory. You recognize it as familiar, natural, deserved. At that point, manifestation is no longer effort, it is expression. You are no longer creating, you are confirming. The most important truth is this: you do not fall asleep to make something happen. You fall asleep because you know it has already happened. That knowing is what brings it into form. Sleep seals assumption, and assumption, once sealed, must express itself. That is the power of falling asleep in the feeling of victory.